The war room fell dead silent as the massive holographic display flickered and went dark. Another star system had just died. Ambassador Krelto felt his 3 hearts sink as he watched the red warning light spread across the galaxy map like a disease. The Void Swarm was winning, and they all knew it. General Vexstar stumbled into the chamber. His usually proud blue skin, now gray with exhaustion. Dark circles rimmed his large black eyes, and his uniform was stained with the sweat of sleepless. "Knights, High Council," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I bring terrible news from the front lines." The assembled aliens leaned forward in their floating seats. Representatives from dozens of species filled the crystal chamber tall, graceful beings with flowing robes, short, stocky creatures with thick armor plating, and everything in between. But they all wore the same expression of growing terror. "Theta Sector is gone," Vexstar continued, pulling up images on his personal display device. "All 17 star systems. Billions of lives lost in just 3 days." High Counselor Morden, the eldest member of the coalition, slowly rose from his throne-like chair. His ancient face was lined with worry, and his 4-fingered hand shook slightly as he gripped the crystal railing. "How is this possible? Our energy shields have protected the galaxy for over 2,000 years. Vexstar activated a battle recording. The hologram showed sleek coalition warships firing brilliant beams of plasma energy at the approaching swarm vessels. The enemy ships were horrifying to look at, black metallic creatures that moved like living things, covered in spikes and strange organic curves that made no sense to civilized minds. "Watch what happens when we hit them," Vexstar said grimly. The plasma beams struck the swarm ships and seemed to work at first. Bright explosions lit up the darkness of space as the alien vessels shuddered under the impact. But then something impossible happened. The damage began to heal itself. Metal flowed like liquid, filling in the holes and cracks. Within minutes, the enemy ships looked completely undamaged. "They learn," Vexstar explained as the recording continued. "Every time we hit them with the same weapon twice, they adapt. Our plasma cannons that worked yesterday are useless today. Our particle beams that saved the Gamma Sector last week can't even scratch their hulls now." The assembled council members began talking all at once, their voices rising in panic. Some species communicated through color changes in their skin, others through musical tones, but the message was the same everywhere: fear, confusion, and growing desperation. Morden slammed his hand against the crystal table so hard it rang. "Like a bell. Silence," he roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. The room fell quiet again. "There must be something we haven't tried. Some weapon, some strategy, some technology we've overlooked." Ambassador Krelto shifted uncomfortably in his seat near the back of the chamber. He was younger than most of the other diplomats, his green skin still smooth and unmarked by age. He had been thinking about this problem for weeks, turning over every possibility in his mind. There was one option, but even thinking about it made him feel sick. "Ambassador Krelto," Morden said, noticing his discomfort, "you look like you have something to say. Please, any idea could save us now." Krelto stood slowly, his legs feeling weak beneath him. Every eye in the chamber turned toward him, and he could feel the weight of their desperate hope pressing down on his shoulders. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to find the words. "Speak," demanded General Vexter. "We don't have time for hesitation." Krelto took a deep breath and spoke the words that he knew would change everything. "There are the humans." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Half the council members gasped in horror while others began shouting in their native languages. The chamber filled with a chaos of sound and color as different species expressed their shock and outrage. "Absolutely not," shrieked Counselor Hexra, her feathers standing on end in agitation. Those monsters were banished from civilized space for good reason?" "They're Deathworlders," added another voice from across the room. "Violent, unpredictable creatures from a world so dangerous it should never have produced intelligent life." But even as the protests continued, Krelto could see some of the older council members thinking. Their expressions had changed from outrage to something else, a terrible, desperate consideration. The humans had been exiled from Coalition space 30 years ago after what the history books politely called cultural differences. In reality, they had been kicked out because they scared everyone. They came from a planet so hostile that simply surviving childhood, there required constant vigilance and aggression that made other species deeply uncomfortable. As the arguing continued around him, another red light appeared on the tactical display. Another star system had fallen to the swarm. Captain Jack Morrison stared at his communications screen in complete disbelief. He rubbed his tired eyes and read the message again, word by word, making sure he wasn't seeing things. After 2 decades of being treated like galactic outcasts, the fancy aliens were actually asking for help. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered under his breath, leaning back in his worn captain's chair. The bridge of the UES Defiance creaked around him. 20 years of hard fighting had left their mark on everything, including the furniture. Lieutenant Beth Rodriguez looked up from her weapons console, her dark eyes curious. Long scars ran down the left side of her face from a pirate raid 3 years back, and her hands never left the firing controls, even when they were supposedly safe. That's how humans stayed alive out here in the forgotten corners of space. "Something interesting." "Cap?" she asked. Noting the strange expression on Morrison's weathered face, Jack turned his screen toward her. "Take a look at this. Tell me if you think I'm losing my mind." Beth read the official Coalition distress beacon, her eyebrows rising higher with each line. When she finished, she let out a low whistle. "They're really that desperate, huh? Must be bad if they're willing to swallow their pride and call us." The message was formal and polite, the way alien diplomats always wrote, but Jack could read between the lines. Something was killing Coalition worlds, and their advanced technology wasn't stopping it. Now they wanted the violent humans they'd kicked out to come save them. "Rodriguez, pull up that attachment. Let's see what's got them so scared." The footage that appeared on their main screen made both humans go quiet. Entire planets were being torn apart by things that looked like a nightmare combination of machine and monster. The void swarm moved through space like a plague. It's consuming everything in its path and leaving nothing but empty darkness behind. Jack watched Coalition warships fire their energy weapons at the approaching horrors. The beams were beautiful. Precise, colorful streams of power that should have been devastating. But the enemy ships just absorbed the damage and kept coming, like they were learning how to resist the attacks. "Jesus," Beth whispered. "No wonder they're calling us. Their fancy laser shows aren't doing squat against those things." Morrison stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at his small fleet floating in the void. 40 human ships, all of them scarred veterans of countless battles. They weren't pretty like Coalition vessels. No smooth curves or gleaming metal. Human ships looked like what they were, weapons built by people who expected to get hurt and wanted to hurt back. The U.S. Defiance herself was a perfect example. She was shaped like a flying brick, covered in armor plating that had been welded, re-welded, and patched so many times that her original color was anyone's guess. Missile tubes and railgun barrels stuck out at odd angles, giving her the appearance of a metal porcupine. Beautiful? No. Effective. Absolutely. "You know what this means, don't you?" Jack asked his lieutenant. "If we answer this call, we're not just helping them fight some war. We're walking right back into the heart of Coalition space, where half the species there think we're barely civilized monsters." Beth snorted. "Cap, I've been called worse things by better people. Besides, look at this footage. The swarm things are eating entire star systems. This isn't about politics anymore. This is about survival." Jack nodded slowly. She was right, of course. But he'd spent 20 years protecting human colonies and hunting down pirates in the Outer Rim. But this was different. This was bigger than human space or Coalition space. This was about whether intelligent life would continue to exist in their galaxy. "All right then," he said, returning to his captain's chair. "Open a channel to all ships in the fleet." The communication system crackled to life, connecting him to the other 39 human vessels scattered around their position. He could see them on his tactical display: destroyers, cruisers, and a few heavy battleships. All of them crewed by people who'd been fighting and dying in the darkness for decades. "This is Morrison," he began, his voice carrying across space to reach hundreds of human ears. "I'm sure you've all received the Coalition distress beacon by now. After 20 years of exile, they want our help." Responses came flooding back immediately. Some captains were angry, others were suspicious, and a few sounded almost amused by the irony. But Jack could hear something else in their voices, a grim determination that only humans seemed to possess. "I won't lie to you," Morrison continued. "This looks bad. Really bad. The enemy is something we've never faced before, and the Coalition's best weapons aren't working. But you know what? Maybe that's exactly why they need us." He paused, looking out at his battle-scarred fleet one more time. "Set course for Coalition space, people. Looks like the galaxy needs some real soldiers." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace right into the middle of hell itself. Captain Jack Morrison's screen lit up with warning signals as hundreds of Void Swarm vessels swarmed around the Coalition's last major stronghold, like angry wasps around a hive. "Well, that's just perfect timing," muttered Lieutenant Beth Rodriguez, her fingers dancing across the weapon controls as target locks appeared faster than she could count them. The Coalition defense fleet was already in full retreat, their beautiful silver ships moving in perfect synchronized formations as they pulled back from the advancing nightmare. Jack watched through his viewport as elegant alien cruisers fired their energy weapons in organized volleys, creating spectacular light shows that barely scratched the enemy's holes. Admiral Vexal's voice crackled through the communication system, panic clear in his translated words. "Human fleet, recommend immediate withdrawal. Our weapons are ineffective. Repeat, fall back to secondary defensive positions." Jack looked around his bridge at his crew. These were people who'd spent decades fighting pirates, smugglers, and worse. In the lawless Outer Rim, they'd learned to fight dirty because clean fighting got you killed. Beth's scarred face was calm and focused. Chief Engineer Tommy Walsh was already rerouting power to the weapons. Navigator Lucy Chen had her hands steady on the controls, ready for whatever insane maneuver Jack might order. "You heard the man," Jack said with a grim smile. "He wants us to retreat." He paused dramatically. "Anyone here feeling like following orders from people who've been losing this war for months?" The bridge crew exchanged glances, and Beth actually laughed. "Cap, when have we ever done anything the easy way?" "That's what I like to hear." Jack opened the fleet-wide channel. "All ships. This is Morrison. I know what the Coalition Admiral said, but we didn't come all this way just to watch these things eat another star system." For seeing through his tactical display, he could see his 40 ships spreading out into attack formation. They weren't pretty formations like the aliens used, just scattered groups of vessels moving in unpredictable patterns. Each captain using their own judgment and experience. The Void Swarm had noticed them now. The mechanical horrors were turning toward the human fleet, their twisted metal bodies moving through space like living creatures. They were huge, some as large as space stations, covered in spikes and organic-looking growths. That made no sense to human engineering principles. "All ships," Jack continued, his voice carrying to hundreds of human warriors scattered across dozens of vessels. "Remember what we learned fighting in the Rim? These things adapt to energy weapons, so let's give them something they haven't seen before. Load kinetic rounds, arm the nukes, and prepare for ramming speed." Coalition Admiral Vexel's voice came over the radio again, this time filled with horror. "Human fleet, what are you doing? You're heading directly toward them, and we noticed." Jack replied calmly, "Sometimes the best way out is through." The human ships accelerated toward the swarm at full speed. Where Coalition vessels moved in graceful arcs, the human fleet charged like a pack of angry bulls. Their ships weren't built for elegance, they were built to survive and to hit back hard when threatened. "All ships open fire," Morrison barked into his communicator. "Give M everything we've got." What happened next shocked everyone watching. Instead of the colorful energy beams the swarm had grown used to, the human ships unleashed something completely different. Railgun slugs, chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds, slammed into swarm vessels like hammers. Nuclear torpedoes, weapons the civilized galaxy had banned centuries ago, detonated in brilliant flashes. Explosive shells, primitive, by galactic standards, tore through enemy hulls that had resisted plasma fire for months. The swarm's adaptive defenses, so effective against energy weapons, had no idea how to handle simple kinetic force. Their shields flickered and failed as solid projectiles punched right through them. Machine vessels that had seemed invincible suddenly found themselves bleeding atmosphere and debris into space. "Holy hell, it's working." "Out!" shouted Commander Mike Turner over the radio from his ship, the UES Revenge. His vessel was an old destroyer that had seen more battles than most humans saw birthdays, but she was still deadly. Their shields can't adapt to good old-fashioned bullets. The tide of battle began to shift as human weapons found their marks. Swarm ships that had been advancing confidently started to stagger under the unexpected assault. But the mechanical horrors weren't giving up easily. They swarmed toward the human fleet in greater numbers, trying to overwhelm them through sheer force. That's when Commander Turner did something that would be talked about in military academies for generations to come. His ship was badly damaged, losing atmosphere through multiple hull breaches. But instead of retreating, he aimed directly at the largest swarm vessel, a massive dreadnought that was coordinating the enemy attack. "This is for every world, you bastards, 8. Turner roared over the radio as the UES Revenge accelerated to maximum speed. The collision was spectacular. Turner's destroyer, moving at incredible velocity, slammed into the swarm dreadnought like a missile. Both ships disappeared in a brilliant fireball that lit up the darkness of space. The explosion was so massive it cleared out an entire section of enemy fighters. Giving the other human ships room to maneuver, Coalition Admiral Vexal watched in stunned amazement as the chaotic human assault began turning what had looked like certain defeat into something resembling victory. His elegant tactical mind couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. "Crazy Deathworlders," he whispered, his translator picking up the awe in his voice. "They fight like they have nothing to lose." Jack Morrison heard the comment and smiled grimly as he watched his fleet tear into the enemy formation. "'Cause we don't," he replied over the communication channel. "We learned long ago that sometimes you have to break things to save them." 3 days after the first battle, Admiral Lisa Carter's reinforcement fleet arrived like a storm breaking over calm waters. Her ships were even more battered than Morrison's original force, veterans of the brutal Rim Wars where humans had learned to fight against impossible odds. Carter herself was a legend among human military circles, a woman who'd earned her rank by surviving battles that had killed better-equipped enemies. "Morrison, you magnificent bastard," Carter's voice crackled over the communication system as her fleet took position. "Leave it to you to start the real fighting without me." Jack grinned, despite the exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. "Figured you might want to join the party, Carter. Hope you brought some of your special surprises." "Well, I brought more than surprises," she replied, with a tone that made Coalition officers listening in feel suddenly nervous. "I brought solutions." Admiral Dexall watched nervously as the second human wave integrated with Morrison's forces. The alien commander had spent his entire career studying elegant battle strategies, precise formations, calculated risks, and minimal casualties. What he was seeing from the humans made no sense by any military doctrine he knew. Carter's first order confused everyone except the humans. "All ships, deploy the viral payloads. Let's give these metal monsters a taste of home." Coalition officers monitoring the human communications started talking frantically among themselves. Viral payloads? What kind of weapon was that? Their questions were answered when human ships began releasing clouds of what looked like ordinary space dust into areas where swarm vessels had been destroyed. But this wasn't ordinary dust. These were Earth-born microorganisms that had been modified in human laboratories. Tiny living creatures that fed on metal and reproduced rapidly in the cold vacuum of space. Within hours, swarm ships that passed through the contaminated areas began showing signs of corrosion. Their hulls started developing holes, their systems began failing, and their perfect adaptive technology struggled to counter an enemy it couldn't understand. "Biological warfare," whispered Coalition Medical Officer Kelmara in horror. "They're using living weapons." "Relax," called out Colonel Tom Walsh over the radio. He was leading a squadron of human fighters in what looked like completely random attack patterns, diving and weaving through space in ways that made Coalition tacticians dizzy. These little bugs only eat specific types of metal. They'll die off in a few weeks when they run out of food. Walsh's fighter wing was performing another impossible feat. They were completely unpredictable. The swarm's advanced computer systems, designed to calculate enemy movements and plan counters, couldn't figure out what the humans were going to do next. The trick, Walsh explained to a group of baffled Coalition officers watching the tactical display, is that we don't know what we're doing either. It's hard to counter random stupidity when even we don't know where we're going next. It was true. Human pilots made decisions on instinct and split-second timing, changing direction based on gut feelings and battlefield experience rather than calculated strategy. The swarm's logical minds couldn't process such chaos, and their perfect defensive systems started breaking down under the unpredictable assault. But it was Carter's most extreme tactics that truly shocked the galactic community. When human scouts reported that the swarm had established a major factory complex in the Zeta system, her response was immediate and brutal. "If we can't take it, we poison it," she declared during a strategy meeting with Coalition Command.
These
things need resources to build more of themselves. We're going to make sure they can't get any. What followed was something the peaceful Coalition had never imagined possible. Human ships began systematically destroying everything in the Zeta system that could be useful. They collapsed the local star by destabilizing its core, causing it to explode and bathe the entire system in deadly radiation. They detonated gas giants, turning them into expanding clouds of toxic atmosphere. They even poisoned asteroid fields by seeding them with radioactive materials that would make mining impossible for centuries. "This is madness," protested Coalition. "Engineer Mortex. You're destroying entire systems. Those worlds could be habitable again someday." Carter's response was delivered with the cold efficiency of someone who'd made similar decisions many times before. "Better a dead system than a swarm breeding ground. We've learned that sometimes you have to burn the forest to save it from the fire." The scorched earth tactics continued across multiple systems. Wherever the swarm tried to establish a foothold, human forces would arrive and make the area completely unusable. They would sabotage mining operations, contaminate water sources, and even trigger solar flares to sterilize entire planetary surfaces. Admiral Saul found himself watching in fascinated horror as humanity's approach to warfare became clear. Where Coalition forces tried to preserve and protect, humans were willing to destroy everything if it meant denying their enemy resources. The breaking point came when human intelligence located the swarm's primary factory, a massive vessel, the size of a small moon that was producing new swarm units at an alarming rate. Carter's plan to destroy it required sacrificing an entire human battle group in a coordinated ramming attack. "You can't be serious," Thexal said when he heard the proposal. "That's 60 ships and 12,000 lives. And if we don't destroy that factory, it'll produce enough swarm units to kill billions," Carter replied matter-of-factly. "Mathematics is simple. 12,000 versus billions." The attack proceeded exactly as planned. 60 human ships, their crews singing old Earth battle songs over open channels, accelerated to maximum speed and slammed into the factory ship from multiple directions. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away, and when it faded, both the factory ship and the entire human battle group were gone. Admiral Dexal stared at the empty space where thousands of humans had just died, his alien mind struggling to process what he'd witnessed. "Your species frightens me," he admitted quietly to Morrison. Jack Morrison nodded calmly, his weathered face showing no emotion as he watched the tactical display update. Another red marker had disappeared. The swarm factory was destroyed, but at a cost that made his chest tight with grief. "Good," he replied simply. "Fear keeps you alive. We learned that the hard way." The truth was that humans had been fighting impossible battles for so long that they'd learned to think in terms of acceptable losses and necessary sacrifices. Where other species saw tragedy, humans saw strategy. Where others saw destruction, humans saw opportunity. It was a dark lesson that Earth had taught its children well. The final swarm vessel died in a ball of nuclear fire above the ruins of what had once been the prosperous world of Kepler Prime. Captain Jack Morrison watched from the bridge of his heavily damaged command ship as the last enemy signature disappeared from his tactical display. 3 months of the most brutal fighting the galaxy had ever seen was finally over, but the victory felt hollow as he looked around at what remained of his fleet. Where once 40 proud human warships had answered the Coalition's desperate call, now barely 20 remained. The rest were floating debris scattered across a dozen star systems, their crews buried in the cold vacuum of space. Lieutenant Beth Rodriguez limped onto the bridge, her left arm in a makeshift sling from the last battle. Her scarred face was even more marked now, with fresh burns from an electrical fire that had nearly claimed the weapons console. "Final casualty reports are in, Cap," she said quietly. Jack nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He'd known most of these people for years. Commander Mike Turner, who died ramming the swarm dreadnought. Captain Lisa Carter, lost with her entire battle group in the factory ship assault. Thousands of good soldiers who'd followed him into this nightmare and would never see home again. "How many?" he asked finally. 58% casualties across the fleet, Beth reported. "Could have been worse, but it hurts just the same." Across Coalition space, celebrations were beginning. News of the swarm's defeat was spreading from world to world, bringing relief to billions of beings who had lived in terror for months. But the cost of that victory was written in radioactive scars across dozens of planets, where human forces had been forced to use their most extreme tactics. 3 days later, Morrison found himself standing in the great crystal chamber of the Galactic High Council. His dress uniform was torn and patched in several places. There hadn't been time for proper repairs between battles. New scars marked his weathered face, souvenirs from the final desperate fight aboard his dying flagship when swarm boarding. Parties had tried to take the bridge. The assembled council members looked different now than they had 3 months ago. The panic was gone from their large alien eyes, replaced by something between gratitude and unease. They had been saved, but they had also learned something about their saviors that made them deeply uncomfortable. "Hi," Counselor Morden rose slowly from his throne, his ancient frame showing the strain of the long war. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber with formal dignity. "Captain Morrison, on behalf of the Galactic Coalition and all civilized species, we offer our deepest gratitude for your sacrifice and service." The old alien paused, clearly struggling with emotions his species rarely displayed in public. "The Galactic Coalition formally invites humanity to join as full members. You have more than earned your place among the stars." A murmur went through the assembled representatives. This was unprecedented. Humans were being offered not just readmission to galactic society, but full membership with all the rights and privileges that entailed. It was an honor that some species had waited centuries to receive. Jack Morrison accepted the offer with a simple nod. But when he spoke, his words sent a chill through the chamber that had nothing to do with the temperature. "I appreciate the honor, Council," he said, his voice carrying the weight of all the battles he'd fought and all the friends he'd lost. "But I want you to understand something important before we shake hands on this deal." He gestured toward the viewports where human patrol ships could be seen moving through Coalition space. "We didn't become good at killing things because we wanted to. Earth made us this way. Every human ship out there, every soldier under my command represents thousands of years of learning how to survive on a world that wanted us dead from the moment we were born." The council chamber fell silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems. Morrison continued, his words measured, but carrying an unmistakable warning. "Our planet taught us that sometimes the only way to survive is to be more dangerous than whatever's trying to kill you. We learned to fight dirty because clean fighting meant extinction. We learned to sacrifice anything, including ourselves, because the alternative was losing everything." Ambassador Krelto, who had first suggested calling the humans, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. This wasn't the grateful acceptance speech he'd been expecting. "You invited us back because we could do what you couldn't," Morrison said. "We could make the hard choices. We could sacrifice entire fleets and poison star systems. Because we understood that sometimes you have to become the monster to defeat the monster." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of peaceful species. That part of us doesn't just disappear now that the war is over. We're your allies, and we'll honor that alliance. But don't ever forget what you've invited into your civilized galaxy. The truth of his words was already becoming apparent across Coalition space. Human patrol ships were taking up defensive positions around key systems, their crews maintaining the same watchful alertness that had kept them alive in the Outer Rim. They were polite to Coalition citizens, professional in their duties. But there was something in their eyes that reminded everyone who saw them that these were people who had learned to kill efficiently. And without hesitation, the galaxy was safe. Now, but safety had come at a price that went beyond the destroyed worlds and lost lives. The Coalition had learned that survival sometimes required embracing darkness, and that knowledge changed them in ways that would echo for generations. Children on peaceful worlds would grow up hearing stories of the human Deathworlders who had saved them. Some would feel gratitude, others would feel fear, but all would understand that the universe was a more dangerous place than their parents had believed. In the quiet sectors where families raised their young in safety, the parents would point to the distant stars where human ships patrolled and explain that sometimes monsters were necessary to keep worse monsters away. It was a lesson the galaxy would never forget. The humans had won them their future, but the galaxy would never be quite as innocent again. Peace was possible, but it was now a peace maintained by those who understood war better than anyone else wanted to think about. And in the darkness between the stars, other threats were already stirring, drawn by the scent of a galaxy that had shown it would do anything to survive. The humans were ready for them.